Now, if you just tuned in, events are moving very quickly on the streets of Tripoli, the Libyan capital, this morning. We just heard in the last half hour a government spokesman, Musa Ibrahim, telling reporters that 1,300 people have been killed. That is what the Libyan government is saying. He is blaming squarely NATO airplanes and NATO forces clearing the way for rebel forces. We are bringing you now pictures from the streets, I believe, of Benghazi, the western port of Benghazi, just hours ago. Obviously, a rebel-friendly city, people ecstatic about some of the news that's coming through. That is that rebels are making that advance on Tripoli, and also reports of the capture of one, if not both, of Colonel Gaddafi's sons, Tam.
That's right. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out in the coming hours, days and weeks, because after the initial celebrations, as we can see there, huge crowds of people jumping up and down and chanting, waving flags. Be interesting to see if this makes way for calm, if the regime is indeed toppled, or if the country is going to just collapse into chaos.
Well, that's the great fear. If Colonel Gaddafi does indeed go over the course of the next few hours or the next few days, the security of Tripoli, the security of the country is by no means guaranteed. There are different strands to the rebel forces. There are concerns about Islamist rebels.
That's right.
Playing a greater role in events in Libya post-Gaddafi. But certainly the situation is, as we go to where, looking very, very desperate for the Gaddafi regime. We also heard at the top of the hour a very desperate, very angry sounding Colonel Gaddafi, his whereabouts unknown, once again urging his supporters to rise up and fight against the rebels to preserve what appears to be, Tam, his fast crumbling regime.
And we're hearing from the BBC, the Libyan ambassador to the UN who's defected from the regime has told the BBC that he's been told 90% of Tripoli is now in rebel hands, and that the rebels are in the next few hours going to catch high officials, including Gaddafi.
This campaign against Colonel Gaddafi, of course, has been going now for 6 long months. The NATO campaign started at the start of the year. There's been a steady progress of the rebels, largely from the west of the country towards the Gaddafi-held east. There have been advances and losses for the rebels over the course of the last few months, the last 6 months. They've taken towns, they've been repelled from those towns, but it does now seem their advance towards Tripoli and their advance towards a new regime in Libya is now inexorable.
And the calls from the regime are becoming more and more desperate. This time they've made 2 calls in recent hours for a ceasefire.
That's right. The ceasefire, it's a sign of how desperate the regime is. NATO is saying in response to that, essentially no. They are also saying the situation on the streets of Libya, the streets of Tripoli especially, are very fluid. The Libyan Rebel Transitional National Council is saying that, yes, it's prepared to sit down and talk, but only on the very strong precondition that Colonel Gaddafi leaves, and he leaves very quickly. Now, his whereabouts is unknown, and we are keeping track on what is literally a minute-by-minute news story in Tripoli and in broader Libya. We'll bring further developments to you as soon as they come to hand.
So don't go away, in other words.